The Obsidian Palace stood as a monument to power and death. Its black floors gleamed like still water, reflecting the eerie blue light that emanated from ancient symbols etched into high ceilings. These symbols told the story of the Feralara Empire, a vast galactic domain ruled by an empress whose beauty was matched only by her ruthlessness. Empress Ferrara moved through the ceremonial hall, her bare feet making no sound on the cold obsidian floor. Her wolf-like ears twitched slightly, sensing the nervous energy of her courtiers. Her silver hair flowed like liquid mercury down her back, contrasting sharply with her fitted black ceremonial armor. Her eyes, deep crimson like fresh blood, surveyed the room with detached interest. "Your Majesty!" General Kestra bowed, his scaled skin catching the blue light. "The preparations for the 48th ritual are complete." Ferrara nodded, feeling the familiar weight of dread settle in her chest. 47 times she had wed. 47 times the ritual had failed. 47 imperial husbands had perished, their purple blood staining the obsidian floor beneath her feet. Each failure had left the empire in deeper despair, and each failure had taken something from Ferrara herself, something she couldn't quite name but felt acutely in the hollow space between her ribs. The council whispers, "Your Majesty." Vex, her spiritual advisor, said as he approached. His reptilian scales shimmered as he moved. "They say if the 48th attempt fails, there will be no one left willing to ascend the throne beside you." "Then we must not fail," Ferrara replied, her voice revealing nothing of her inner turmoil. She had begun to wonder if she was cursed, if the ancient telepathic bond that had sustained her lineage for centuries was somehow broken within her. The ritual was draining her life force with each attempt, and she could feel herself becoming weaker. The Empire was in danger, and she was its greatest threat. "Commander Rain," she called to the armored figure standing by the entrance. "Bring forth the candidate." The doors to the hall opened, and Commander Rain entered leading a prisoner in chains. The courtiers gasped and murmured among themselves. Ferrara felt her heartbeat quicken in surprise. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "This is not a noble of our realm. This is—" "A human, Your Majesty," Commander Rain confirmed. "Captured in the recent border skirmish. His name is Lucas." Lucas stood tall despite his chains. His muscular frame spoke of a warrior's discipline, and the scars that marked his face told of battles survived. His eyes, a deep green unfamiliar to Ferrara's kind, held no fear, only a steady, calculating assessment of his surroundings. "You bring me an alien as my 48th husband?" Ferrara's voice was dangerous, low. General Kestre stepped forward. "Your Majesty, forgive the presumption, but the Council believes that our traditional methods have failed. Perhaps an unconventional approach is needed. The human warriors have shown remarkable mental resilience during interrogations. Perhaps this one might withstand the ritual." Ferrara approached the human, circling him slowly. "Do you know why you are here, human?" Lucas met her gaze unflinchingly. "I gather I'm to be your next husband, and judging by the whispers, the position has a rather high mortality rate." His insolence should have angered her, but Ferrara found herself intrigued instead. 47 of your predecessors have failed the telepathic bond. Their minds were not strong enough to withstand the connection to my consciousness. They burned from within, their life force consumed by the ritual. "And you think I'll be different?" Lucas asked. "I think you have nothing to lose," Ferrara replied. "And neither do I." She turned to Vex. "Prepare him for the first trial. We shall see if this human's mind is as resilient as General Kestre believes." Lucas was taken to a preparation chamber, where servants washed away the grime of imprisonment and dressed him in ceremonial garments of deep purple, the color of imperial blood. As they worked, he studied his surroundings, noting exits, potential weapons, the number of guards. His military training had taught him to observe, to plan, to survive, When they brought him to the ritual chamber, Ferrara was waiting. She had changed into a more elaborate ceremonial armor, one that hugged her form while emphasizing her otherworldly beauty. The chamber was smaller than the Great Hall, more intimate, with the same obsidian floor, but walls carved with images of previous rituals, images that ended in death. "The first trial is of the mind," Ferrara explained, gesturing for Lucas to kneel before her on a circular platform. "I will enter your thoughts, explore your memories, test the strength of your consciousness. Most cannot withstand even this preliminary connection." Lucas knelt, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been tortured before. I survived. This is not torture, human. This is communion." Ferrara placed her hands on either side of Lucas's head, her fingers cool against his temples. The telepathic matrix activated, blue light flowing from the floor up through their bodies. Lucas felt an immediate pressure, as if his skull were being compressed from all sides. Then came the invasion, Ferrara's consciousness slipping into his mind like ice water into a warm pool. Images flashed before him. Ferrara as a child, being taught the responsibilities of royalty. Ferrara's first marriage at a young age, watching in horror as her husband collapsed during the ritual. The guilt and fear that followed. The second attempt, the third. Each failure hardening something inside her until the deaths became routine, expected, necessary sacrifices for the Empire. Lucas expected pain, but instead, he felt a deep, overwhelming loneliness that wasn't his own. Using his military discipline, he compartmentalized, creating mental barriers that allowed him to observe rather than be consumed by the connection. He saw Ferrara's memories, felt her emotions, but maintained his separate self. Ferrara probed deeper, looking for weakness, waiting for the moment when his mind would buckle under the pressure of hers. But Lucas remained steady, his consciousness a sturdy structure against the telepathic storm. She pushed harder, showing him the deaths of her previous husbands, the agony they experienced as their minds were torn apart by the ritual. Still, Lucas endured. When Ferrara finally withdrew from his mind, she was visibly shaken. No one had ever withstood the first trial without screaming, without begging for mercy. Yet, this human knelt before her, sweat beading on his brow, breath coming in controlled, measured intervals, but fundamentally intact. "You did not break," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "What do you carry within you that is different?" Lucas looked up at her, seeing her not as the fearsome Empress, but as the lonely, frightened being he had glimpsed in her memories. "Perhaps it's not what I carry, but what I've let go." Ferrara dismissed the attendants, leaving them alone in the ritual chamber. "Explain." "I've seen war," Lucas said simply. "I've lost comrades, friends, family. I've learned that holding on too tightly to anything, fear, love, hope, can destroy you. I've learned to observe pain rather than be consumed by it." "And this is the human way?" "It's my way. I suspect you have something similar. 47 deaths would break most beings. Yet here you stand." Ferrara studied him with new interest. "The second trial will test your physical form. It will take place tomorrow. Rest, human. You will need your strength." As Lucas was led away, Vex approached Ferrara. "Your Majesty, something unprecedented has occurred. He not only survived the connection, but he appeared to observe you in return. This has never happened before." "I know," Ferrara replied, her voice distant. "For the first time in 47 attempts, I feel seen." That night, Ferrara paced her private chambers, troubled by the day's events. The human had witnessed her memories, her failures, her fears. Yet instead of using this knowledge to manipulate or plead, he had offered understanding. It was disconcerting. Lucas, meanwhile, lay on his bed in the luxurious prison they had provided, processing what he had learned. The Empress was not simply a cold-blooded killer. She was a prisoner of tradition, of duty, of an ancient ritual that was slowly destroying her. Each failed marriage had taken not only the life of her husband, but a piece of her own soul. The next evening, Lucas was brought to a different chamber. This one was dimly lit with purple light, draped in soft silks, filled with an exotic scent that immediately heightened his senses. Ferrara waited, wearing a lighter version of her ceremonial armor that revealed more of her pale blue skin. "The second trial is of the body," she explained. "The ritual requires not only mental compatibility, but physical resonance. I must determine if your form can withstand the energies involved." Lucas stood in the center of the room, aware of the change in atmosphere. "And how do you determine that?" Ferrara approached him, her movements fluid and predatory. "Through touch, through sensation, through pain and pleasure intermingled, the body reveals what the mind conceals." She placed an icy hand on his chest, directly over his heart. Lucas felt a shock of cold energy spread through his body, making his muscles tense involuntarily. Ferrara watched his reactions closely, monitoring his heartbeat, his breathing, searching for signs of weakness. "Your species regulates temperature differently than mine," she observed. "Your heart beats faster. Your blood runs warmer." Lucas remained still under her touch, using the same discipline that had helped him survive the mental trial. But he did more than endure. He observed. He noticed the slight tremor in Ferrara's hand, the almost imperceptible quickening of her breath when their skin made contact. "You're afraid," he said quietly. Ferrara's hand jerked away as if burned. "What did you say?" "You're afraid, not of me, but of the ritual itself. You fear that you'll die during the process, just as your husband's did." Ferrara's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You presume too much human." "I saw your memories," Lucas reminded her. "I felt your fear. Each time you connect with someone, it drains your life force. 47 times you've been diminished. You wonder how many more attempts you can survive." "Silence," Ferrara commanded, but there was panic in her voice. No one has ever survived long enough to tell you what they saw," Lucas finished for her. "But I did. And I saw that each failure hasn't just killed your husbands. It's been killing you slowly." Ferrara turned away, her composure cracking. "The ritual requires a perfect union of minds and bodies. Without it, the imperial lineage cannot continue. I have a duty to my people, to my ancestors." "Even if it destroys you?" "Yes," she whispered. "Even then." Lucas took a step toward her, closing the distance between them. "There must be another way. 47 failures suggest the traditional method isn't working. Perhaps it's time for something new." Ferrara looked at him, vulnerability flashing across her features before the imperial mask slipped back into place. "The third trial will take place in 3 days. It is the final and most dangerous. Few have survived even the first 2 trials as you have. Prepare yourself, human." As she left, Lucas called after her. "My name is Lucas. If I'm to be your husband, even temporarily, you might as well use it." Ferrara paused at the doorway. 3 days, Lucas. Then we will see if you truly are different from the others." The following days brought an unexpected development. Instead of being confined to his chambers, Lucas was summoned repeatedly to Ferrara's private council room. Under the pretense of preparing him for the final ritual, the Empress began to question him about human ways, about his experiences as a soldier, about his understanding of connection. "Your species forms bonds without telepathy," she mused during one such meeting. "How can you truly know another being without sharing consciousness?" Lucas considered the question. "We share experiences, conversations, touch. We learn each other over time rather than all at once. It's slower, but perhaps deeper in its way." That seems inefficient. Maybe. But there's value in the journey of discovering another person. And there's safety in the gradual nature of it. No risk of burning out from too much. Too soon. Ferrara was silent for a moment, contemplating his words. In our 47 previous attempts, we followed tradition exactly. The mental trial, the physical trial, then immediate full immersion in the telepathic bond. Perhaps the tradition itself is flawed. It was the first time she had openly questioned the ritual, and Lucas recognized the significance. What if we approached the final trial differently? How? Instead of an immediate, overwhelming connection, what if we built toward it gradually? Shared memories, emotions, experiences one by one, allowing both minds to adjust? Ferrara looked troubled. That is not how it has been done for centuries. And for 47 times, it has failed, Lucas pointed out gently. Sometimes survival requires adaptation. Their conversations continued, growing more personal with each meeting. Lucas shared stories of his life as a soldier, the comrades he had lost, the battles he had survived, the ways he had learned to control his emotions to endure. Ferrara, in turn, began to reveal more of herself, her loneliness on the throne, the pressure to find a suitable match to continue the bloodline, her growing fear as each attempt ended in failure. The ritual is consuming my final reserves of strength, she admitted on the eve of the third trial. The council does not know, but Medicane, our imperial physician, has confirmed it. I may have one attempt left before my life force is too depleted to recover. Lucas had suspected as much, but hearing her confirm it made his chest tighten with an unexpected protectiveness. Then we must succeed. And if we don't, we will, Lucas said with a conviction that surprised them both. Because for the first time, you're not facing this alone. The night of the final trial arrived. Traditionally, it would have been a grand ceremony in the Great Hall, with the entire court as witnesses. Instead, at Lucas's suggestion, they met in a private ritual chamber, with only Vex and Medicane present as required observers. The room was dominated by an obsidian platform at its center, surrounded by channels filled with bioluminescent fluid that would respond to their telepathic energies. Ferrara arrived wearing her most elaborate ceremonial armor, but her face betrayed her exhaustion and fear. "Are you ready?" she asked Lucas, who was dressed in a simple ceremonial robe of deep blue. "As I'll ever be," he replied, offering her a reassuring smile that felt strange on his battle-scarred face. They took their positions on either side of the platform, placing their hands palm down on its smooth surface. The bioluminescent channels began to glow in response, blue light crawling up their arms like living vines. "Remember," Lucas said quietly, "gradually. Don't try to overwhelm me all at once. Share one memory, one emotion at a time. I'll do the same." Ferrara nodded, and the connection began. Unlike the first trial, where Ferrara had invaded his mind as a conqueror, this time, the connection formed like a conversation between equals. She offered a memory, her first day on the throne, young and uncertain. He accepted it, honored it, and returned one of his own, his first day in military training, terrified but determined. Back and forth they went, building a bridge between their minds, memory by memory, emotion by emotion. The bioluminescent fluid pulsed brighter with each exchange, the channels filling with light that spiraled up around their bodies. Then came the deeper sharing, Ferrara's first failed ritual, the horror of watching her young husband die, the guilt that had haunted her since. Lucas offered his own trauma in return, the first time he had been forced to kill in battle, the nightmares that followed, the way he had learned to live with the weight of necessary violence. As their connection deepened, the telepathic matrix expanded, creating a shared mental space where neither was merely observer nor observed, but both existed simultaneously. Lucas experienced Ferrara's entire life, The lonely childhood in the palace, the weight of imperial duty, the increasing desperation with each failed ritual, the growing fear that she was defective, unworthy of her lineage. Ferrara, in turn, lived Lucas's experiences, the camaraderie of soldiers, the discipline of military life, the ways humans connected through shared hardship and joy, the strength he had built by accepting pain rather than fighting it. The bioluminescent fluid now burned almost white with energy, filling the channels completely and spilling over to create patterns of light across the obsidian floor. Vex and Medicane stepped back in alarm. They had never seen such a reaction in any previous ritual. At the center of the telepathic storm, Lucas and Ferrara reached the critical moment, the point where all previous attempts had failed, where the husband's mind had been overwhelmed and destroyed by the Empress's consciousness. But this time, instead of Ferrara's mind crushing Lucas's, their consciousnesses moved into perfect resonance, like two instruments finding harmony. The result was not domination, but synthesis, a hybrid consciousness that preserved both individuals while creating something greater than either alone. Lucas's human resilience combined with Ferrara's telepathic power, creating a balanced system where energy flowed freely between them, without overwhelming either. The light from the channels surged upward, enveloping them both in a column of brilliance that reached the ceiling. For a moment, their physical forms seemed to merge, boundaries blurring as the telepathic bond manifested in the material world. Then, suddenly, the light collapsed back into the channels, leaving the room in relative darkness. Lucas and Ferrara stood facing each other across the platform, both breathing heavily, their eyes wide with shock. "Medicane," Ferrara called, her voice unsteady. "Assess us." The imperial physician approached cautiously, first examining Ferrara with his specialized equipment. His scaled face registered shock. "Your Majesty, your life force readings. They're stabilizing. The degradation appears to have halted, and there are signs of regeneration." He turned to Lucas next, running similar scans. "And the human. His cellular structure is showing enhanced regenerative capabilities. His neural pathways have been altered, suggesting the beginning of telepathic abilities. This is unprecedented." Vex stepped forward, his religious vestments rustling. The ritual didn't just succeed, it transformed both participants. In all our recorded history, nothing like this has occurred. Ferrara reached across the platform, taking Lucas's hand. Their touch sparked a small flash of blue light between their palms. "Not transformation," she corrected. "Evolution. We've found a new way forward." The news spread quickly through the palace, despite the private nature of the ceremony. By morning, the entire court knew. The 48th ritual had succeeded, and with an alien no less. Reactions were mixed. From fear, an outsider has infiltrated the Empress's mind, to awe, the human survived where 47 nobles failed. General Kestre, who had initially suggested Lucas as a candidate, now viewed the success with suspicion. "Your Majesty," he argued in the council chamber, "while I am pleased the ritual succeeded, we must consider the implications. This human now shares your consciousness, your memories, your knowledge of imperial defenses. He is a security risk." Ferrara, seated on her throne with Lucas standing at her side, regarded the general coolly. "The same could have been said of any consort, General. The difference is that Lucas succeeded where your noble candidates failed." "But he is not of our kind," Kestre insisted. "How can we trust him with the future of our empire?" Lucas felt Ferrara's anger through their new bond and placed a calming hand on her shoulder, a familiarity that caused murmurs among the courtiers. "Perhaps," Lucas suggested, "the question isn't whether you can trust me, but whether you trust your Empress's judgment. She has chosen me, and through our bond, she knows me more thoroughly than any being has ever known another." Vex, who had been studying ancient texts since the ritual, spoke up. The old prophecies speak of a time when the outsider shall bring new blood to revitalize the ancient line. We have always assumed this referred to nobles from distant systems, but perhaps it meant something more literal, a different species entirely. The debate continued for hours, but it was clear that Ferrara's position was strengthened, rather than weakened, by the successful ritual. Her physical recovery was visible to all. The color had returned to her skin. Her movements were more fluid, and her telepathic abilities were sharper than they had been in years. In the days that followed, Lucas began to experience the changes Medicane had predicted. His wounds healed faster, his senses became more acute, and most significantly, he developed rudimentary telepathic abilities, nowhere near Ferrara's power, but enough to maintain their connection even at a distance. Their bond continued to deepen. What had begun as a desperate experiment had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership of equals, based on mutual understanding and respect. "I never expected to find this," Ferrara admitted one evening as they stood on a palace balcony, watching ships arrive and depart from the capital city below. "In all my preparations for the 48th ritual, the best I hoped for was survival." Lucas looked at her, still sometimes startled by her alien beauty, the delicate wolf-like ears that expressed her emotions, the pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the moonlight. "And instead, I found someone who truly sees me, not just the Empress, but the person beneath the crown." She placed her hand over his heart, where she could feel the steady rhythm that had become synchronized with her own. "In 47 attempts, no one ever looked back. They were too afraid, too awed, too consumed by the ritual to actually see who I was. But you did." Lucas covered her hand with his. "Where I come from, we have a saying: sometimes you have to face death to learn how to live." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger. "Your Majesty, representatives from the Andorian royal house have arrived. They request an audience regarding their own succession crisis." Word of Ferrara's successful ritual had spread beyond their borders. The Andorian queen had experienced similar failures with her consorts, though not as many as Ferrara's 47. They sought guidance, hoping to replicate the success. Over the following months, more delegations arrived, rulers and representatives from systems throughout the galaxy, all facing variations of the same problem. The telepathic bond that had once been common among advanced species was failing across civilizations, and many looked to Ferrara and Lucas for answers. Some attempted to follow their example, seeking mates from different species. The results were mixed. Some succeeded in forming stable bonds, while others suffered catastrophic failures. It became clear that what Ferrara and Lucas had achieved wasn't simply a matter of cross-species compatibility, but something unique to their specific connection. General Kestre remained opposed to the changes sweeping through the Empire. He gathered a faction of traditionalists who believed the introduction of alien influence would weaken their civilization. They plotted to separate Lucas from Ferrara, believing that without his stabilizing presence, the Empress would revert to her former state. Their opportunity came during a diplomatic mission to a neighboring system. Lucas was separated from Ferrara's party in what appeared to be a security incident, but was actually a coordinated attack. Cut off from his guards, Lucas found himself facing Kestre and his conspirators. "The Empress may be blinded by your influence," Kestre said, his scaled skin gleaming in the dim light. "But I see the truth. You are weakening our empire, diluting our pure lineage with human contamination." Lucas felt Ferrara's alarm through their bond, knew she was rushing to his location. He needed only to delay. "Your pure lineage was dying, General. 47 dead consorts suggest your way wasn't working." "Better extinction than corruption," Kestre snarled, drawing his ceremonial blade. Lucas, despite his enhanced abilities, was outnumbered. He fought skillfully, his military training serving him well. but a blow from behind sent him sprawling. As Kestre raised his blade for the killing stroke, the air crackled with energy. Ferrara appeared at the entrance, her eyes blazing with telepathic power, her silver hair floating around her as if in a wind only she could feel. "Stand down, General," she commanded, her voice resonating with authority. Kestre hesitated, then sneered. "You arrived too late. Your Majesty, one slash of my blade, and your precious human bond will be severed." "You misunderstand," Ferrara said calmly, stepping forward. "I wasn't concerned for Lucas. I was giving you a chance to surrender honorably." Lucas, despite his position on the floor, smiled up at Kestre. "You really should have researched human military tactics before attempting this coup. Rule 1. Always have a backup plan." Before Kestre could respond, the mental blast hit him, not from Ferrara, but from Lucas. The rudimentary telepathic abilities he had developed had been a carefully guarded secret, known only to Ferrara and Medicane. The shock of a telepathic attack from a human was enough to stagger Kestre, giving Ferrara the opening she needed to disable him with her own, far more powerful abilities. The conspirators were quickly rounded up by loyal guards. Kestre, stripped of his rank and position, was brought before the imperial court for judgment. "You have committed treason against the Empire," Ferrara declared from her throne. "The traditional punishment is death." Kestre knelt before her, defeated, but still defiant. "I acted to preserve our way of life, Your Majesty. Our traditions were killing us," Ferrara interrupted. 47 dead consorts. My own life force draining away with each failure. The Empire stagnating because we refused to adapt." She glanced at Lucas, who stood beside her throne, and a silent communication passed between them. "However, this new era requires new approaches. Death is no longer our only answer to betrayal." Instead of execution, Kestre was sentenced to exile, sent to a remote outpost on the Empire's borders, where he would have years to contemplate the changes occurring in the civilization he had sought to preserve. "Some will call this weakness," Vex observed after the sentencing. "Let them," Ferrara replied. "For too long, our empire has equated strength with cruelty, power with destruction. It's time we learned that there is strength in mercy, power in understanding." As the seasons changed, the effects of Ferrara and Lucas's bond continued to ripple outward. The Empire, which had been declining under the weight of failed traditions, began to flourish again. New alliances formed with species previously considered too different for meaningful cooperation. Medicane's ongoing studies of their bond led to breakthroughs in understanding telepathic connections. "It's not just compatibility," he explained during one briefing. "It's complementarity. The human consciousness has structures our species lacks, and vice versa. Together, they create a more stable, more powerful whole." Lucas adapted to his role as imperial consort with surprising ease. His military background provided valuable insights into defense and strategy, while his human perspective offered fresh approaches to diplomatic challenges. Though some in the court still viewed him with suspicion, most had come to respect his contribution to the Empress's renewed vigor and the Empire's prosperity. For Ferrara, the change was more profound. The loneliness that had defined her existence for so long had been replaced by a constant, comforting presence in her mind. Through Lucas, she experienced emotions she had never allowed herself to feel: joy, hope, even humor. The cold Empress who had presided over 47 executions gradually gave way to a more balanced ruler, one who tempered power with compassion. 1 year after the successful ritual, they stood together on the palace balcony, where they had often shared private moments. Below them, the capital city glittered with lights, ships from dozens of worlds moving through the night sky like luminous fish in a dark sea. "I used to stand here alone," Ferrara said, "watching the Empire continue its business while I remained isolated, untouched. Lucas wrapped an arm around her waist, feeling the now familiar resonance between their minds. And now? Now I understand what was missing all those years. She turned to face him, placing a hand over his heart, where their connection was strongest. Not just a consort to continue the lineage, but a true partner to share the burden. Lucas smiled, still sometimes amazed by the path his life had taken, from prisoner of war to imperial consort, from isolated human to telepathically linked partner of an alien empress. Where I come from, we call that love. Ferrara's lips curved upward, an expression she had rarely shown before their bond. A simple word for a complex phenomenon. Humans like to simplify, makes it easier to understand. And is it easy to understand? Lucas considered the question, feeling the depth of their connection, the way their hearts beat in perfect synchronization, the manner in which their thoughts flowed together, yet remained distinct, the bond that transcended species and tradition. No, he admitted, but it's worth the effort to try. As they turned back to watch the city below, Ferrara's thoughts whispered through their bond. 47, I burned in the flames of failure. The 48th kindled a new hope for the entire empire. Lucas tightened his arm around her, his own thoughts joining hers in the silent conversation they now shared constantly. The empire continued to evolve, and at its center stood the unlikeliest of pairs, the alien empress and her human consort. Living proof that only by sharing our souls can we truly overcome our differences and our fears. In the Imperial Archives, a new entry was made, recording the successful 48th ritual and the beginning of a new dynasty. But the true story, the story of how loneliness was defeated by understanding, how tradition was transformed by adaptation, how two different beings found strength in vulnerability. That story would be told for generations across countless worlds, inspiring others to look beyond their differences and find the connections that unite all sentient beings. For Empress Ferrara and Lucas, however, the greatest triumph wasn't the saved empire or the historical significance of their bond. It was the simple, profound joy of no longer being alone, of having found, against all odds, someone who truly saw them for who they were and chose to stay.